Let's take a look at the README. I've already imported this into Insomnia, so I can use that to test things out. I think this is probably the best way to test these sorts of things. Any kind of API using like Postman or Insomnia, or there's a few other options that are like those. And I'll run pytest-x at the end just to make sure that it's passing everything in there. But there's some stuff that does not cover, so it's not a comprehensive way to test this. I'm not going to worry about the front end. So I'm going to implement models for pizzas, pizzas, and restaurant. And so based on the diagram here, I can see that there's going to be restaurant pizzas that belong to pizzas and they belong to restaurant. So they have the foreign keys on there. And I can see that pizzas are going to be related to restaurants through restaurant pizzas, and vice versa. Restaurants are going to be related to pizzas through restaurant pizzas. Yes, that should be restaurants plural in the diagram. It's not, but the table name, to be consistent, should be plural. There's nothing wrong technically with having singular table names, but you don't really want to mix the two. And I think in general, the normal thing to do, I guess, the convention is usually that they're going to be plural, but you won't always see that. Depends on just whatever code base you may be working in, or I don't know, different people coming from different, I guess, perspectives or whatever may have landed on using singular table names. But more often than not, I've seen them be plural, and yeah, they should be consistent. Speaking of, there's something that's slightly weird about, let me see this, but I guess they're referring to the classes, so that's why this S is not colored the same, because it's kind of trying to emphasize these are the class names, I think. But I'm going to go into, I guess I can run this. It's not really going to matter too much if that environment is, oops. I don't know why that didn't copy correctly. There we go. I'm not really going to be doing anything that makes that matter, probably, because I'm running the commands from inside server anyway. I think that allows me to run the commands from out here. But if I'm in server, it doesn't really matter. So I can start this now if I want. It's not really gonna have the relationships, but interesting. That's weird. Could not import app. Did I? Oh, that's why. If I was gonna run this command, which I did, but if you're gonna do that, then you should do it from one directory above server, because otherwise it's gonna think that it needs to look down into server and look for apps. So I'm going to run it again up here. I can fix that issue. Okay, still couldn't do it. Let's put them shell. Very weird. Could not locate a Flask application. Oh, now I need to go into server. There we go. So I kind of tripped myself up trying to run this at the wrong time, but should be all good now. So the database is initialized. I believe that has not created any migrations. So there's probably nothing. There's basically no database yet, actually, but it's all set up where I can create migrations. So I could create my first migrations now, and then add stuff and then migrate again. It's not the worst idea to do that because then if you ever need to roll back, you can roll back to at least what the sort of given default structure was. The fewer times that you create migrations, the harder it is to sort of like backtrack anything. So it's not a bad idea to go ahead and just Flask db migrate, create tables, and then Flask db upgrade. And now we have our app.db. We can look at it here. We see we have these three tables, but this one does not have any foreign keys in it yet. The others look okay. I won't need to change those, but we need to make some changes to our model to set some foreign keys into our restaurant pizzas table, so it can relate to the other two. I'm going to go back to my models. What's that? And here, table names are already set, so we just don't need to touch those. And all we need to do is add foreign key columns here. So this will be pizza ID equals db.column db.integer db.foreign key, and now we say the name of the table, which was here, and then dot, and then the column that we're referencing, which is the ID column. Then we can do the restaurant ID equals db.column db.integer, comma, db.foreign key. And this will be restaurants.id. So now I can Flask db migrate -m add foreign keys to restaurant pizzas and Flask db upgrade. So that should fix my schema. I refresh this. I see those foreign keys in here now. It's usually a good idea to make it like nullable false, and even adding some constraints like I guess that would be the constraint that we'd add. I don't know if there's any other ones that I would really want to add at the time. But it's not a big deal if I make it nullable false or not. In this case, we're not really validating that. So next thing I want to do is set up the actual relationships. Really need to change my default here. But I want a restaurant to have many pizzas through restaurant pizza. And this is talking about it's listing them in with capital letters here. So it's referring to class names here. So we're not talking about the table names when we look at this. Table names could also be capital too, but that's also like conventionally they're going to be lowercase and using underscores and plural. And then restaurant pizza belongs to restaurant and belongs to pizza. So they're written in this order, but these actually can't really work unless you establish this first, because you can't have anything through something if you're not already related to that thing. So we first need to establish that restaurants have many restaurant pizzas belong to restaurants. Pizza has many restaurant pizzas and restaurant pizzas belong to pizza. So restaurant, we can say, has restaurant pizzas equals db.relationship. And then we say the class name, which is restaurant pizza. And then we can say back populates. And we'll say what you would call on a restaurant pizza to get back to the thing that it's related to, which that would be dot restaurant. And we'll do the same in our pizza, except it'll just be pizza instead of restaurant. And then in our restaurant pizza, we'll relate it to a pizza and then back populates restaurant pizza, except that will be plural because a pizza has many restaurant pizzas. So this is going to match with what we called the relationship on the other side. That's how we can kind of remember it. So back populates is always going to refer to what we call the actual attribute on the other side. So that's the one we're still missing. So we'll put restaurant here equals db.relationship. Restaurant back populates restaurant pizzas. Because our restaurant class has restaurant pizzas. And our pizza class has restaurant pizzas. So we have those. And then our restaurant pizza has a pizza and has a restaurant. So that's why we have this and this. So they all seem to match up at this point. Now that we've established that, it's a good idea to establish what happens if you were to delete one of the parents. So if I deleted a restaurant, I would want the restaurant pizzas to also be deleted because there's no reason to keep track of which pizza relates to a restaurant that doesn't exist anymore. And same thing with pizza. If the pizza doesn't exist anymore, there's kind of no use for the restaurant pizza instance that was linking that pizza to a restaurant. So in both cases, we're going to say cascade equals all. Is that what it is? Cascade equals all delete. I can't remember. I'll have to double check. I always have to confirm this anyway. So SQL Alchemy. Delete children. Cascades. All comma delete dash orphan. Okay, that's what I thought, but better to verify. And I'll go to my pizza, put a comma here and put that there. So it's 3 arguments we're passing to this db.relationship. One is the class name, then there's the back populates, and then there's the cascade. We don't need to do it in the child. That can cause some weird unintended effects where deleting one parent might somehow also cause another parent to get deleted, which, because it's many to many, that could actually unintentionally delete all records given like a certain scenario. If things were like related enough, then deleting one could cause like your all 3 databases to just clear out. So just because like we deleted one restaurant, sure, we want all the things that relate pizzas to that restaurant to be gone, but we don't want the pizzas themselves to be gone. So we don't need any kind of cascade stuff here. So this should be in good shape and I can run my seeds. So we'll say python seed.py. Cool. I am still missing some of my relationship stuff though, which is I'm still not relating restaurants to pizzas or pizzas to restaurants. So I've established that they both have restaurant pizzas, but now I need to establish that they relate to each other through that. So I'm going to use association proxy for that. So restaurant has pizzas, and I'll use association underscore proxy, and I'll pass in the thing that we have many of already, the thing that we're going through, be restaurant pizzas. And then I need to specify what it is about those restaurant pizzas that can relate us to pizzas. And each restaurant pizza has a pizza. So pizza there. So all the things we're going through, and then what we need to do with each one to find the thing we want. So similarly in our pizza class, we're going to say that it has many restaurants. And we'll use the association proxy. And we're looking through our restaurant pizzas. And on each one, we're going to be looking at its restaurant. So that relates pizzas to restaurants. Let's go back to the README. So that part is all done. I can set serialization rules to limit recursion depth. I skipped this last time. I'm not going to skip it this time. I didn't skip it entirely, but I skipped it for the time being and then came back to it. This time I'm going to set some basic rules that I'm not going to have to think too hard about, that will for sure limit recursion depth, because the recursion really, the only thing that ever causes it is by essentially going through like a circular pattern of relationships where like it's related to something that then is related to it, that then is related to something, and you go into this endless loop. So it's always the relationships that can cause that kind of problem. So if I want to just have a baseline that avoids the issue, I can just set up a sort of base rule, and I'll say serialize rules equals, and this needs to be a tuple. So I'm going to need a comma at the very least, even if I'm only putting one thing. And I'm going to say I'm going to exclude restaurant pizzas by default. One thing that slightly tripped me up with this was it seems like if I don't do anything with pizzas, it actually doesn't end up in my to-dict by default. It seems like with one of the labs it did, and I had to like specifically, if I didn't want it in there, I exclude it. But maybe I'm either misremembering or there's some other slightly different thing going on here that's making it so it doesn't include that by default, and I'm not sure what that would be. It could have something to do with the metadata or the versions of the packages that we're using. Not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that excluding restaurant pizzas is actually all I'm going to need to do. But if it's not really going to hurt anything if I say minus pizzas, but I'm pretty sure it didn't make any difference. I'm going to leave it like this. If you leave this comma out, this is not a tuple anymore. It's just considering that basically we wrapped a string in parentheses, and it's as if like the parentheses don't exist. It's sort of like math. If you wrapped a number in parentheses, it doesn't actually do anything. If I do like 3 times 5, you can do that in Python too. Like if I do like x equals, but then like 7, so then this is going to cause it to do, or I can do like plus or whatever. So this is going to make sure that this happens first before it does that. Or if I have like plus 5 and I do 7 times that, then like it's going to make sure it adds these together before it multiplies by 7, rather than doing like 21 plus 5, that sort of thing. So like same thing with like this kind of thing. Like basically it doesn't do anything unless we have commas. That signals to Python that like, oh, this is intended to be a tuple. So it should be a collection of things rather than just a single string. So serialized rules, you always have to set it equal to a tuple. So that's why we need a comma, even if there's only one thing in there. Otherwise, our auto formatter might just get rid of the parentheses for us, and now we're just setting it to a string, and that's going to break things. So it needs to for sure be a tuple. And we're just getting rid of those. We'll do the same in our pizza. So we'll exclude our restaurant pizzas by default. Then in our restaurant pizza, we will exclude the pizza. And we can exclude the restaurant. So these are things we have direct relationships with that we want to exclude from our serialization by default. That way, whenever we call toDict, it's impossible that we're going to get an infinite loop unless we specify that we want things that we're relating to. Then it's possible to get infinite loops again, but we just have to be careful about how we do it and we'll avoid them. But it's going to be easier this way, I think. It's going to be a little more straightforward. So this is something I can test. Did I run the seed already? I did. So I'm gonna say Flask shell and grab a pizza. So we'll just say db.session.get pizza, comma 1. So there's our pizza. If I call .toDict on it, then we see it's just got the ID, name, ingredients. Doesn't have anything else. Doesn't have restaurant pizzas, doesn't have restaurants. I can do the same thing, except change this to restaurant. And we'll see it just has the address, ID, and name. No pizzas, no restaurant pizzas. And I can try it with a restaurant pizza. And I see it's got a price ID, restaurant ID, and pizza ID. So no pizza and no restaurant. So our JSON is kind of bare bones. It doesn't have anything with relationships at all. So that's going to be our default. Then later when I need to include relationship stuff, I can specify what I want to include. And then I can just grab whatever pieces I want. And if I run into an infinite loop, then I'll kind of refine it a little bit from there. So now that those are all set up, I'll set up a validation, then I'll go to my routes. So restaurant pizza needs a price between 1 and 30. At validates def validate price takes self key and price, and if not 1 less than or equal to price less than or equal to 30, raise value error. Say price must be between 1 and 30 inclusive. Otherwise, we'll return price. That should be good for validations. I can test that in Flask shell if I want. I can grab a restaurant pizza, and instead of calling toDict, I'll say dot price equals 50. And it seems like it didn't really complain about that. That's because why is that actually? It's because I forgot one little thing here where I need to specify which attribute this validation is for. Otherwise, it doesn't really know. Even though I called it price here, it doesn't really, I could name this method anything. It's in here that it actually that actually causes the validation to run for that attribute. So I'll try that one more time, and it still seems to be letting me. I wonder what happened there. Let's, did I not save? Must have hit the wrong key. Okay, try this one more time. I'll grab it separately this time just to have like a variable. So restaurant pizza equals that. There we go. So restaurant pizza, we have that object. Now I'm going to set the price equals 0, and I threw the value error. And I'll try it with 50, still throwing the error. Usually it's good to test your edge cases. That's why I did 0. So I should try like 30 and make sure that works. Yep. 1 works. 31 does not work. So we're all good. So now I can go to my app and start setting up my routes. So where was that README? I want my JSON data to look like the examples they give. So when I make a GET request to /restaurants, I should get back a list of JSON objects that have address, ID, and name for all of my restaurants. So I've got Insomnia open over here with the requests all saved. So if I'll clear this. How do I clear this? Okay, cool. Yeah. Now I need to start my server. I'll just say Python app.py, make sure it's running on the right port. And send. So, of course, that's what you're going to get by default before we set up the route. So, not found. As soon as we set up a route, that should clear that up. So, in my app.py, I'll make a class for restaurants. And we could call it like restaurant resource or restaurants resource or whatever to differentiate it. I'm just making sure it's plural so it's not the same as what was in my models. And it makes sense to me to call it plural. It kind of matches the URL structure. So that's going to inherit from resource. And we'll put def get. I don't think we need that. We can just leave it like this. And let's do this to make sure it's working. It won't work yet because I need to import that, which I have my auto imports working now finally. So I can get those added in. They would have already been there by default, but if you have something that gets rid of unused ones, then you have to fix your tools so they can import the ones that you need. Once I've set up that class, I need to set up some things so that my app can use that route. So first, I'll say the API equals API and pass the app in. And that comes from Flask RESTful as well. And now I can do API dot add resource, and I'll pass in the resource class that I just made, the restaurants, and then the route that should take us there, so slash restaurants. So now in Insomnia, I should just see hi once I run the server again. Okay, it doesn't work. I did need self to be here. There we go. Now I see hi. Couldn't remember if I needed that. Looks like you can avoid it if you're using the sort of plain add app.route approach. But when you're setting it up within a class, then it's going to take self, which kind of makes sense. So now I want to make sure I can actually get the restaurant. Or get all of the restaurants and put them in a list and have them serialized. So I just see those 3 attributes for each one, which I've already established because of my sort of default rules that I set up. I'm not including the related restaurant pizzas, so it should only include these 3 once I get them, if I call toDict on it. So I'll say return make response, and that will be a list of restaurants dot to dict for restaurants in restaurant dot query dot all. And that'll be my first argument that I pass to make response. And then I'll do comma 200 just to make it explicit. That's not strictly necessary. It would happen on its own, but it's a good idea to just remember to use your status codes. And this already looks exactly how I want it. I don't need to make any adjustments. I don't need to worry about any rules for my serialization or anything. I've already set some defaults that just give me the plain old attributes I want. So we should be good on that. Before I go to any other routes, I want to pause here though. Are there any questions about anything I've set up so far? Anything anybody wants me to repeat or clarify? So anything about this route or anything in my models that I was working on? So I've tried to explain my thought process pretty thoroughly, but I can always miss things. So definitely let me know if I leave anything out that you're confused about or anything. Or if I just do anything that you're not sure, like why I did it or what it was doing. But I'll go to the next route. So get slash restaurants and then a particular restaurant ID. So I'm going to need a different class because it's a different URL structure. And I'll call that restaurant by ID. Also inherits from resource, and it will also have a get And this one is going to get self and ID. That'll be part of the URL. So assuming we get an ID, we can go and grab that restaurant. So we'll say restaurant equals db.session.get, and I'll give the name of the class and then the ID that we're looking for, which came from here. Then I can return make response restaurant.toDict, comma 200. But I should check first if there was a restaurant. So I'll say if restaurant, then do that. And then if there wasn't a restaurant, then I can return something that says like error restaurant not found, comma 404. So I'll hop back over to Insomnia. This is the GET request to restaurants / and then the ID, but I actually can't do that yet because I didn't add my resource. I just created the resource. I have to add it to the API. So API.add resource restaurant by ID. And then the next argument will be /restaurants /caret int : ID close caret. Now I can go over here and hit send, and I see I get the restaurant. It doesn't quite look like what I want it to look like. So I have ID, address, and name. I don't have restaurant pizzas. That's the only top level key that I'm missing. So I'll say, okay, let's add our missing attribute. I'm not going to change anything in my models. I'm going to keep these defaults the same. And I would say I'd only change them if there was like a particularly compelling reason to change them. Right now, I'm not seeing any super compelling reason because, like, for one, my first request I made, I didn't have to do anything. So it's like, okay, great, that default worked for me perfectly. But now, actually, that was up here. But now this default, it's not quite enough. I need to include the restaurant pizzas. So I'm going to say rules equals, and that also needs to be a tuple. It's going to be parentheses with a comma. And then before that comma, I can put the thing that I want. So I was missing restaurant pizzas. So I'm not saying minus restaurant pizzas, I'm just saying restaurant pizzas here. And this should stick to the default rules that I have, except I'm overriding the minus restaurant pizzas. So now it should include the restaurant pizzas. Now I also set up by default that the restaurant pizzas don't include the pizza or the restaurant. So that's going to save me from hitting an infinite loop, even though I'm overriding one of those rules that was kind of preventing it. I still don't expect to hit a loop because I did this. If I did, I could solve that problem still. But for now, let's just try it and see what we get. Perfect. So now I get the address, ID, name, and restaurant pizzas. And then there's only one, but it includes the ID, pizza ID, price, and restaurant ID. Now if I go back to my README, it's actually not the structure I wanted still. So I have restaurant pizzas, but my restaurant pizzas are lacking this part. I only have ID, pizza ID, price, and restaurant ID. I don't have the pizza. The reason I don't have the pizza is because of what I did here, where I said don't include pizza, don't include the restaurant. So this part was good. This part is still okay, but it's causing us a problem right now that we're missing it. But that's another thing I can just easily add. So in my rules, I say not only restaurant pizzas, but I also want restaurant pizzas dot pizza. And I'll hit send again. And now I included that too. I have the address ID name, restaurant pizzas, and then in here, I have the ID, pizza ID, price, and restaurant ID, but I'm also including the pizza, which has the ID, ingredients, and name, which is exactly what this one looked like. So now I'm matching exactly what we're seeing here as what's expected in the returned JSON. Now, while I'm here, I'll try and go to like some other one and make sure I get the error message I expect. So error restaurant not found. Perfect. That's exactly what that looks like. So now I need to be able to delete a restaurant. So I'll go back to my app. And I already have some stuff set up for that URL pattern. I just don't have a delete. So inside this class, I'll say def delete. Separate that out a little. That's going to get self and ID also. And I still want pretty much the same idea where I'm going to look it up first. And you can do this in different, like the logic is not set in stone. I could say if not restaurant, return this. And then here I'll do whatever else I want to do. Or I could reverse it and say like if restaurant, then I want to do some stuff. And then I'll leave this outside here. So if restaurant, that'll make it match this a little more. I want to delete it. So db.session .delete the restaurant and db.session .commit and turn an empty string with a 204. Doesn't say to do a 204 here, it says appropriate status code. The tests should determine what it should be. So I'm pretty sure it's 204, but I'll run the test later and make sure. And this should be what happens if we try to delete one that doesn't exist. So I'm going to go back to Insomnia, make sure that we can get restaurant one. Whoops, hit the wrong button. Stop sharing my screen. There we go. So we can still get our one restaurant that we want. Now I'm going to make a delete request to that same route. And I see I get a 204, no content, no body returned. So that restaurant should theoretically be gone now. So if I hit send again, I should actually get my 404 error restaurant not found. Perfect. Now I go back here, try this again, same thing. Restaurant's not there anymore. But I still have like this restaurant and this restaurant. It's not the first one. So that covers that. Now I'm on to get pizzas. So that'll be a new URL. So I'll make a new class for pizzas. Inheriting from resource. Def get. And here I'll say pizzas equals pizza.query.all. And I'll return make response. And that'll be first a list of pizzas, then the 200 status code. And so in this list, it'll be pizza.toDict for pizza and pizzas. And I'll try that out once I add that resource. So api.add resource pizzas / pizzas. So now I go to / pizzas and hit send, and I get these 3 pizzas. And they have ID, ingredients, and name, which matches exactly what I wanted here. Now I'm on to restaurant pizzas. It's a post request there, so yet another URL. So new class for restaurant pizzas. Inheriting from resource. Def post. It's going to receive self. And I want to make a new restaurant pizza. So restaurant _ pizza equals restaurant pizza, like that. And I want to get the JSON from the request. So restaurant pizza JSON equals request dot get JSON. And now I'll loop through it. So for key in restaurant pizza JSON, I want to check if a restaurant pizza has that key. So if has attribute restaurant pizza key, then set attribute restaurant pizza key, and then the value, which would be the restaurant pizza JSON brackets key. Now, while doing this, I could hit a validation failure. So I'm going to wrap this in a try except block. And the type of error I would expect to receive if that happened would be a value error. So I'll say accept value error. So if there was an error, I want it to I'll say return, make response, errors, and then a list that just says validation errors. I don't know if that's what it wanted me to say, something like that. Yeah. But if there wasn't an error, so once I've done all this, I should be able to add that restaurant pizza. So I can say like db.session.add restaurant pizza, db.session.commit, and then return make response restaurant pizza dot to dict comma 201 for created. And then this one, when it's validation errors outside of this JSON object I made, I think that was supposed to be a 400 in this case. And we'll see what this looks like. So I'll try failing first. So my price is 50, which should fail. And I can't find it. I forgot to add the resource. API.add resource. Restaurant pizza. Restaurant pizzas, plural. And that goes to slash restaurant underscore pizzas. Perfect. So when I have bad data, I get some JSON back saying errors, validation errors. It's a 400 bad request. Now, when I do it with good data, it seems to have successfully created. I get a 201, and it comes back with the new restaurant pizza. Doesn't look quite like I want it to. It's missing the pizza and the restaurant. Has everything else. And of course that makes sense because in my models, I said by default, don't include pizza, don't include restaurant. That has served me well up to this point. I've had to make like one customization at some point that needed to include the restaurant or the pizza, I think. I can't remember which. I think I needed to include the pizza. So I said restaurant pizzas dot pizza to add that in. When I was trying to show the restaurant pizzas for a particular restaurant. But here I just need to add both in. But I'm already looking directly at the restaurant pizza JSON, so I don't need to do like the restaurant pizzas dot. It's just when I call to dict, when someone has successfully made a new one, the rules there will be that I want to include the pizza and I want to include the restaurant. So now I'll try again. And it created it. You can see the ID keeps going up every time because it's creating new ones each time. And we see that it's including the ID, the pizza ID, price, restaurant, and restaurant ID. And then within those, the pizza, it's just got the 3, and the restaurant just has this 3. Pretty sure that's what we're looking at here. So that covers that. And that should be everything. We'll run our tests and make sure they pass. Yep. So we're all good. If I really wanted to like go back and clean things up a little with my serialized rules, there's only like one change that I would even think about making at this point, which is I've noticed every time I'm trying to display JSON for a restaurant pizza, at the very least, I've been wanting to include pizza every time. Because I'm only doing it in two places. When I display a single restaurant, I'm including restaurant pizzas and then saying to include the pizza. And then over here, when I create a new restaurant pizza, I'm saying to include the pizza and include the restaurant. So I'm always wanting to include the pizza. So if I really want to clean things up, I could say just don't get rid of that by default. Just get rid of restaurant. I'll have to put the comma here after it to make it still be a tuple. And that makes these extra rules irrelevant. So they still shouldn't cause a problem, but there's no reason to have them. So I'll get rid of the restaurant pizzas.pizza. And I'll get rid of the pizza right here. And just specify that when I'm showing a restaurant, include the restaurant pizzas, which now should include the pizza by default, but not the restaurant. And then when I try to display it here, then I'm including the restaurant, and it's going to include the pizza also, because pizza is always included by default now. So that would be a way to sort of like simplify things a little more, even once I'm done. But there was no reason I needed to do that. I'll just make sure that my tests are still all passing. I could test, if I were doing this for real, I would probably like want to test all my routes in Insomnia again, that at least those two routes, make sure they still look good. I'm pretty confident that they do though. And you could even go further and say, actually, since I'm only needing to apply some like special rules once whenever I create a new one, but I don't need to anywhere else. I could go the sort of reverse logic too, and it'd be about the same. So I could say, okay, let's say when we make a new one, I don't want to specify anything, which means my models will actually just not have any serialized rules at all. Restaurant pizzas will just always include everything. Now we just need to go back to where we were up here for our restaurant pizzas, or sorry, for our restaurant by ID, and we're including restaurant pizzas. Now, instead of needing to add something, we're needing to remove something. So now I'll just do another one that's minus restaurant pizzas dot restaurant. So instead of adding pizza, I'm now removing restaurant because the default didn't get rid of any relationship stuff. So they would both be there otherwise, but now I'm removing restaurant from it. But since I wanted to include both, when I made a new one, I just left it as blank here and didn't have any default rules in here. But that's all stuff that is totally optional. And I think you can see that probably the simplest approach is just have some default rules, removing all the relationships. And it kind of makes it so that you don't have to think about as much or like wonder as much or bounce back and forth as much if that's kind of what you set up in the beginning. Because then you know that if you ever want to have anything with relationships, you just add them in when you need them. And I would wait till the end or just not even bother at all with like deciding later on like, okay, based on what I'm actually like when I'm actually including related objects, should I just change my default so I can stop having to add the rules here? Or should I just leave my default as is and just specify when I want the related objects? But if you delay that decision towards the end, it kind of simplifies things for you where you don't really need to think about it much. You just assume the default is don't include relationships. So that's what I recommend until you get really used to it and you maybe just feel like it doesn't make any difference to you anymore. Like you could just, you know what you want to do. Um, but probably by that point, you're going to be using a better thing like Marshmallow anyway. So I think that's it. Anybody have any questions, clarifications? Anything at all? All right. Thank you then. I'll go ahead and stop it here and open breakout rooms again. And after lunch, I'll talk about authentication and give you your project group assignments.